Okay, guys, it's time to get started. So, my name is Christy Thompson, and I am the marketing director here at BIS Technology Group. And just a few things. Your pizza should be delivered between the hours of 11 a.m. to 12 if you haven't received it just yet. I know there were a lot of orders going out today, so just please be patient with us on that it will get to you. And if you don't receive it by noon, just send a message over in the chat bubble to the right. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to drop them in here and we'll take them throughout the presentation or at the end if we're unable to get to it at that time. We'll also have a survey at the very end. We're going to be giving away a $50 gift card. And if you'll just do us a favor, we'll send that link out at the very end. If you can fill out that survey, that would really help us to know how we can improve our events and what other topics you guys would like. So I am going to go ahead and introduce Phillip Long. He is the CEO of BIS Technology Group. He is a technologist and entrepreneur who specializes in providing technology solutions and security consulting to businesses along the Gulf Coast. He's worked in the IT industry for over 15 years, has 600 plus clients from Mississippi to Pensacola, all the way up to Auburn, and he's the current owner of 5 businesses. He also has a certified information system security professional. This certification is actually backed by the Department of Defense. So this is really huge. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Phillip.
Great. Thank you so much, Christy. We'll jump right in. And I'd like to introduce my special guest. I've got Josh Chrisman here. He is with us from one of our partners, Axcient. And he's been in this space for many years in the what we call business continuity space. And he started at Aperture, and then he was with them right before Dell purchased them. And he's kind of a unique animal in the fact that he is very technical, as well as he understands the business side of things. So they immediately put him in a sales engineering role, and he's done so well at that ultimately he came over to Axcient, and he has moved into their national account manager. So he's one of the kind of the rare animals. It's heavy tech, really smart in the technical area, but he also understands business and how, basically disaster recovery and business continuity can impact business. So welcome, Josh. How are you, sir? I wonder if are you muted? We may have him muted. There you go. Well, good. How you doing today, Josh? Well, can you hear me, Josh?
Unmuted.
We may be having just a few technical difficulties, so we'll just
chat with him offline and get him synced up on here, because he sounds like his computer audio is on as well as he's dialed in. So I'll go ahead and move forward. Not a big thing. Josh, basically, let me just tell you, he is they're a strategic business partner with us, and I actually sit and have sat on the partner advisory council for Axcient, which is a mainline company that does disaster recovery, and so I know these guys really well, and really a good partner for us and a good product for the the end user business owner. So I want to kind of today, what I want to do today, I've got a lot of material to give you guys, so I want to be able to move quickly through the slides, kind of like a conversational piece. And one of the main things that I want to do is for you guys, if y'all have any questions or any comments or anything you'd like to elaborate on, I'd like for you to put in there in the chat bubble, and we'll deal with the chats as they kind of move along. I want to start off by kind of framing the current threat landscape, and then I want to narrow that down and talk about some of the breaches in a little bit of detail. I want to put a face on the guys that are attacking us, and then I want to get over to some things that are very practical that we can do in order to protect ourselves. So I'll jump right in here, kind of talking about the current threat landscape. This is as of Q4 2019, and we'll be getting a lot of new data coming out shortly after Q1. And but as of Q4, ransomware cost doubled from Q3 of 2019. It was about $41,000 to $84,000 in Q4 of 2019. There's two major players out there, Ryuk and Silent Makibi, and there's a new one coming on the scene called the Grand Maze, or the Maze Group. And what we're seeing is a bit of change in their strategy, in that these guys aren't just encrypting files anymore, but they're actually stealing the data first. And in the business world, we call that double dipping. And that's, you know, I always say pigs get fat and hogs get slaughtered. That's being hoggish. And I'm going to talk about what the implications are to their stealing the data first. So this is just a graph showing the average hit that we're taking in from October of 2019, and we see that it's ticking up. We see some really big ones in there, but here's our trend line at just under $100,000 is what they're asking for ransom. There's a lot of speculation as to why it doubled. One of which is that they're recognizing that a lot of companies are doing the right thing and getting cyber liability insurance, and that they can actually get the money pretty easy if a company has cyber liability insurance. So there's a lot of speculation out there. That's just being one of them. I talked a moment ago about the exfiltration of data, you know, basically stealing the data. And this is an actual pop-up, if you will, that a client received after having their files encrypted. And if you notice right here on the orange, it says, "We open our news site today. We will post notification about your breach as well as part of data that we have downloaded. Link to the news will be sent to all leading mass media. You will get it too. Have a nice weekends." So what we see here is that they have encrypted files, and they have also stolen data, and they have a website where they're going to put a sampling out there. Matter of fact, you know, I won't have you going to these sites, but this site is up and working, and you can actually see the folks that they have encrypted, and they put a little bit of their data on the website in hopes of saying, "Hey, you better pay us so that you're able to keep your name from getting out in the media." I think it's important for us to understand that the problem with cyber crime is that it's unlike other types of crime. Whenever we have a cyber crime, we don't feel sorry for the victim. Like if you're a business owner and you lost a lot of your client's data, your clients are not going to treat you well. They're going to really look at you with contempt. They're going to think that either you were negligent or you were, negligent, or possibly, even, just I'm searching for the word right now, but basically they're not going to look at you well, and they're going to ultimately, it's going to be a very negative impact from a public relations standpoint on your company. So here's another thing that is very troubling, is that attackers have had access to victims' environments, basically their computer network, for 100 days before they were discovered. That was a report that Verizon had put out. So what that means in layman's terms is basically an attacker got a foothold on your system. they had some form of a piece of software on your system that they're collecting data, they're enumerating, they're figuring out what they have on the network and then collecting data for 100 days before they were discovered. And the reason this is that there's a lot more threats out there. We can see this is a company that does a lot in the antivirus test space or malware test space, and we can see that over the years, we can see an incredible rise in the number of potential threats that are out there in the marketplace. So it's I'm going to speak to that a little bit later, but most of this is happening on what we call a zero-day threat. That's kind of a technical term. I don't know if you know the general population really understands that term, but if we look at it, there's basically a vulnerability that has been introduced, and no one knows about it. And the reality is that any piece of software, anything a man builds, is a vulnerability in it. And it's just a matter of it being discovered. And then once the hackers discover it, there's this window of opportunity here, and it's referred to as a zero-day threat. And it's where those systems are very vulnerable to this particular, say, malicious software or some type of hacking attack. And what normally happens is that there is a malware detection. Your antivirus, your desktop, or your endpoint security product usually gets to the game first to block it. And then there's a level of protection that comes with that, but sometimes that can take a day, several days, a week before that is fully patched or fully protected. And so we have these partial vulnerabilities, and then ultimately we have the software manufacturer, say Microsoft or whoever, you know, Adobe, Chrome, Flash, whatever, all the softwares that we use, all of them have vulnerabilities, and then ultimately they get a fix out and you run the update. That's why it's very important that you run the updates in today's world, because most of the updates are not just like bug fixes like at one point they were. They're actually patches that are security related. Large portions of them are done that way. All right, so, you know, a lot of times whenever we think about this cyber criminal, we always see this image of a cyber criminal, right? It's some guy in his mama's basement or whatever in a dark hoodie, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the reality is that's not the case. Now, again, this picture isn't a bunch of hackers. This is just a representation of some Ukrainian people, and this is the type of face that really we can put on a lot of the cyber criminal activity. And they're coming out of this area. They call it the CIS. It's basically the areas that broke away from the USSR. And there's reasons for that. You know, one of which we hear a lot about, of course, is you know, we hear, you know, Ukraine, right? We keep hearing that. That's one of the areas that is a big hotbed for corruption. You know, we all went through the impeachment, you know, trials and all that, and we hear that, and it's very true what's going on. So why are there so many cyber threats, and why are so many of them coming from that Eastern European country? Well, there's really an ever-growing list of devices that are being connected, and each of these devices again have vulnerabilities, and there's more data being collected than ever before in the world. And you know, the Internet of Things, right? Everybody has a camera at their house now. Everybody has a thermostat. Everybody has a smart watch. Everybody has all of these things, a Google Chrome, all these devices, and more and more and more of the world is being connected, and more of the softwares are being connected. You know, your accounting package may be connecting to your service tool, you know, like QuickBooks may, you know, like we have an interface with our service tool, and so on and so on and so on. So we're having more devices, and the devices are becoming more interconnected is one reason. There's also a mass availability of cheap malware and even free hacking tools. That AV report that I showed earlier, the guys that are making these tools are good, and they're selling them cheap and even free, that allows for an abundance of tools to be able to hack people. Another thing is there's a very low likelihood of capture, primarily because of the cryptocurrency market. I forget the CEO at Stripe, which is an online payment systems company. She recognized, you know, she wishes she had the power of cryptocurrency, but the reality is the cryptocurrency ecosystem is really being driven a lot by bad actors like this that are getting paid with an anonymous payment like cryptocurrency. Another thing that is important to understand is that in those countries, the countries that have corrupt systems in banking, they're able to easily take large amounts of cryptocurrency and put it into fiat money in to exchange for, you know, basically American or Russian or Ukrainian dollars, taking the crypto and turn it into real dollars. Whereas in America, we would get questioned if we started moving large sums of capital from you know, cryptocurrency. It's going to raise some flags, and you're going to have to answer some questions. Whereas in those countries, that's not the case. They turn a blind eye because of the socioeconomic conditions in those countries. They're not doing well. And they also, a lot of these guys are STEM educated. They're very educated people. You know, they have science, technology, engineering, and mathematics training. So there's a large pool of human resources that don't look well upon the West. They have the cryptocurrency as a means to steal money. They've made a lot of cheap software, and there's a lot on the market that is readily available, that is not difficult to use, and so on. So that's why, in essence, we have so many cyber threats. Then, you know, the next question is, why is there so much focus on data? You know, why data? Well, I like to represent it in my mind as a static tank of oil. It has a given amount of money, depending upon the market, whatever, but ultimately, let's say that tank of oil is worth $1 million. Well, if the difference between that and data is that data is like an oil well. There are so many different ways, and they're coming up with new ways to exploit data to generate revenue off of it. They can fraud the, you know, taxes. They can get bank loans. They can fraud healthcare. They can just simply sell the data. So there's just so many ways that having data that is available to generate revenue. So there's something that really we have to have a different mindset whenever we begin to look at our data, and we need to you know, protect it as if it is very, very, very valuable. I read a report recently. I don't remember exactly the source, but it was talking about most companies' most valuable asset is their data, and we need to start thinking that way. All right, let's kind of jump into some
Hey,
recent
Philip,
attacks.
before we jump
Yes,
in, I just wanted to let you know Josh Chrisman's on the call. And
cool.
Josh, you with us?
Yeah, hi. Nice to be here.
Thank you, Josh. I appreciate you making it, man. I'm going to ping you on a couple of comments from your perspective as it relates to really, you know, the Axcient suite and protect everything as we move forward through some of this.
Yeah, absolutely.
So just stand by for me, and I apologize for any kind of technical problems that we had there on the front end.
Oh, not a problem.
Yeah, okay. Well, I want to talk about something here, and I'll tag you in, or I'll tell you what, jump in. If you see some of these kind of things, I'm going to speak specifically to our market on some of the things that have happened, and to try to help people have a better understanding of what happened. So I want to start off with the city of Pensacola. Recently, this is back in December, they had a ransomware attack where they were hit through their web portal, and they really pretty rapidly, this was the Grand Maze, or the Maze Group as they're called, is who got them. And a matter of fact, there was some data that was even on their website, some data, and in all standards, they were very quick to respond. It took down their large portions of the network. It pretty much shut the city down. They, from what I understand, did not pay the ransom, and but they were up in 8 days, which is quite phenomenal in the scheme of things. So they had a pretty good disaster recovery plan. Not great, but they were able to restore systems and restore data relatively quickly in the scheme of life. So another one was the city of Atlanta that happened. Now this happened several years ago, a couple years ago probably. Now this was very interesting. They had lived on their systems, I believe, for 300 days, and they captured their backups in that they went in and basically they lived on the systems. They expanded their availability, elevated their privileges so that they could see pretty much all of their network, and they went into the backup files, and they had a retention policy of 90 days on their backup. And what they did was basically uncheck the boxes for the data set. And they were getting successful backups, but they took out the data that they needed that was valuable to the city. And ultimately, the backups ran and ran and ran for 90 days, having no real data in them. They were showing successful, but they had taken that out. And on the 91st day, they encrypted the city. And of course, we know that cost the city of Atlanta, I'm telling you, hundreds of millions of dollars in order to restore that data. Another one recently, was last year, was SPRINGHILL Medical Center, and we know that was a ransomware attack. I have not seen a formal report come out on that, but ultimately we know that ransomware, they hacked the system. And what I want to kind of have everyone think about is the implications to things. We have a medical center. They have scheduled patients for surgery. They have all of these things that are going on. And in today's world, they can't just grab the file from the chart that whatever, they can't go put their hands on it quick. And a lot of these files are stored in storage, and there's just no way to make it all happen. There will be lawsuits forever, because think about it, somebody's grandmother was getting surgery that day, and they didn't have access to the files that they need because the system was encrypted, and the grandmother passed. Well, how would you ever know whether it was due to them not having the data that they needed? I mean, again, this is the genie's out of the bottle whenever this happens. One thing, and I'll kind of bring in the COVID-19, the bad guys are saying that they're not going to hit hospitals during this time. So they have some form of decency within them, because they're not going to hit hospitals during this time. But another bad thing that happened there was that they one of the main guys at the hospital got caught in the parking lot or something, and they said, give us a comment about what's going on, and he said no comment. It's another thing that you do not want to do from a public relations standpoint. You've got to have a prepared statement. We'll talk about that a little bit more. This is something very interesting as it relates to client attorney privilege. This is an attorney group out of Texas, and this is another Grand Maze group that got these guys. They paid the ransom because they were able to get the attorney notes from the client and the attorney. They hacked into the system and they got the notes. And the attorney was this group was very, scared about, their private notes hitting the world. So they paid to keep that from actually hitting the world. Because, I mean, think about it. If they would have made a comment about a particular client or a particular circumstance or what their thoughts were about the particular case, and that were to hit the public eye, that could damage the reputation of this attorney, forever, maybe unrecoverable to a large degree. So, we really, when we start thinking about data theft, not just encryption, it's something that's very, very, very scary, the things that are going out there. All right, so let's talk about some threats that are in the market. One of which is, of course, ransomware, and I think at this point in time, everybody knows that. One thing to consider here is that 75%, I believe this came out of Q4, this was Sophos report. It's the fastest growing, of course, it's been that way from a long time, but 75% of those infected were running an up-to-date antivirus. So it kind of goes back to that zero-day threat thing that I showed you earlier. Just having antivirus is not enough to protect yourself with the threats that are out today. If you think, oh, I've got antivirus on my system and I'm safe, you're definitely going to be in a position to expose yourself. This is kind of elaborating more about it being the fastest growing type threat. Currently, every 14 seconds a business is hit with ransomware. By 2021, that's going to be every 11 seconds someone is going to fall victim. So it's happening, it's accelerating, and don't really know as far as what's going to happen. I'm curious to see reports with everybody working from home that really is going to possibly, I believe, make some people very insecure because they're going to do remote access in ways that is not secure. So I'm very curious to see what the data is going to show us, whenever all this gets straightened out. Another thing that is interesting is that just the target, the verticals that are being hit. And this is Q4 data, and software services 11.7, professional services 20.4, healthcare 18, consumer services, and so on and so on and so on. This is something that it's definitely hitting all sectors of the market. So nobody's safe, but we're not seeing, we think about like the banking and all that kind of stuff. And, I really believe that a lot of that has gone down, like financial services and things. They're because of the work that they have done in protecting themselves. I think that they have basically hardened themselves to the point of where they're not as big a target, which is encouraging for me as a guy that's in the business of protecting. That's very encouraging. Another thing to think about with these threats is, 98% of the time, whenever somebody has been hit, they this was from Q3 to Q4. This is stats from that period. They paid the ransom and they were able to secure their data. So there is honor amongst thieves in the fact that if you pay them, you can get your data back. But the trouble with that is that the average time that the client was down, or the network's not up and running, was 16.2 days, with either completely down or limited down. So a lot of businesses can't they're not able to sustain 16 days of not being able to service their clients. And then when you add on the public relations hit on top, there's a lot of businesses that will not be around because of that.
Phil, just to to add into that a bit, if you want to go back a slide.
Sure.
When we pay the ransom, we're in effect promoting ransomware, because when we pay it and give into it, you're essentially allowing it to happen and saying, okay, if you make it cheap enough, if you restore the data at a 98% rate, I'm going to get my data back. So they're just going to keep on doing it. And in regards to the 16.2 days of the average downtime, there's a nice little calculator that you can provide, and it actually goes through the cost of downtime, where an average company can say, okay, for every hour I'm down, it's costing me this much money. And like you said, most SMBs, small to medium businesses, would go out of business after a couple days of being out. So having reliable backups in place to prevent these sorts of measures is really a drop in the bucket in reality to paying the ransom and being down that long.
Exactly. That's right. And that's 100% right. The reason why they give you your files when you pay them is because they want to be sure that they're looked upon as, yeah, gosh, all I got to do is give them the money and I know I'll get my files back. They don't want to get to where it's a 75% chance, but because ultimately, they're trying to make money there. So very good good points there. Another thing here is that phishing attacks are, email phishing attacks is one of the biggest ways that people are getting hit. And one of the recommendations, we'll talk about that a little bit more shortly, but you really need to block webmail from your business network. Allow your staff employees to check, of course, corporate mail, but their personal mail they need to check on their own devices, because that's a big risk to you. This comes from an FBI report where there was I think this was a 2.5-year report, and a $26 billion loss on email compromise. And I don't know if you want to jump in on that, if you have any comments to kind of what you have seen, Josh.
Yeah, the overall consensus essentially is that mail is secure and being backed up, and in reality it's not. There's guarantees of uptime but not recoverability, and that's why it's important to have a third-party backup on things like email. But phishing attacks and emails that contain vulnerabilities go out constantly. And these numbers are real, and we see it every day. And so again, it's having preventative measures in place that can help prevent data loss and being compromised by somebody clicking something that they shouldn't click.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is one thing that you mentioned there that I want to elaborate a little bit more on, is that Microsoft Office 365 does not back up your email. And a lot of people, I think that they do, and that's something that is, alarming. And if something happens, you can't go and have them, they're not going to be able to provide those email. And really, I think in today's world, I mean, I know I do, I love being able to go search my email, and have a whole, go back in time. I think that's standard operational procedure today. We'll just talk about, I'm gonna breeze through this because I know we all see bad emails coming all the time. Fake invoice, number one way that they're getting us. They're putting something inside of like a macro or a file inside of a Word document or an Excel document or some type of attachment, and then it's dropping a file on your machine that in itself is not malicious, but it has the ability to become malicious. Fake invoices are huge, that they will, because again, you're like, I didn't buy that, click, click, bang, you opened it, there you go. Then another thing is this is one I actually got that where you can see that suck whatever, you know, the link there to verify my Netflix account was actually not going to Netflix. I hovered over it. That's a good way to kind of see what's going on. Something really, you know, ironic about that is that I had just changed credit cards on my Netflix account. And so the timing of this was very good, you know, basically because I knew I just changed my Netflix account and I needed to change that there. So, but again, I mean, if we ask the people on the call, a very large percentage of them, I'm sure, have a Netflix account. So they're using things that we know. Kind of going to that business email class timeline attack. I'm not going to go over this in great detail, but I want you to understand the way the bad actors are working. Basically, they develop a hit list, and it could be very targeted. It could be, you know, a phishing attack where they're going to send out 50 emails, 100 emails, which is going to make it very difficult for any filter to know that this is a bad email. That's how come emails can come in when sent out by, you know, a professional bad guy. They can get emails to your account, and with social media, they can absolutely 100% know a lot about you. And what we'll see, and this is a particular attack, kind of a timeline attack based off of trying to get people to wire money. And the attacker launches the attack and they, you know, sends it out. They get the list, they launch the list in the same way we do marketing, right? And then they respond, they try to get them talking, and they may use information that they very much know about based on, say it's a CEO, CFO type attack. They're looking at social media, they're looking at LinkedIn, and they see that the CEO is going to be out of town. So they may say, hey, I know you're out of, you know, email from the CEO back to the CFO. Hey, I know you're out of town. I need you to wire some money. That deal we've been talking about has come through. Here's the place to wire the money. And then ultimately they extract the money. A lot of times they'll use what they call mules, somebody who is not actually the perpetrator or the mastermind. They'll use somebody to actually go to the bank and get the money and do all that kind of work, and then report back to them to give themselves a layer of protection. And then ultimately they try to just repeat that. Anything you want to weigh in on that, Chris?
No, it's pretty accurate. You know, comes in, looks legit, clicks something, and does its thing. You know, and they've gotten so sophisticated with how there's a delay sometimes in what it's doing, and it trickles in or it's full on. So there's lots of different variations in what we see in this.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I always like to kind of talk to people about hackers and the dark web. And when we look at the dark web, what is the dark web? We all have heard that term. Well, I like to define it this way. The surface web is things that you don't have to log into. Say it's just a site that you're going to go in, say it's an Axcient site or a Business Information Solutions website, and you're not actually logging in, you're just looking at data. There's really a very small amount of sites that are that way anymore, because even Google and Facebook and, you know, your bank sites, your 401ks, all the places that you go, you actually log into, and that's called the deep web. That's basically where there's a login. You've got to have a username and a password in order to you know, get into that. And then beneath that is a very small, the dark web is not that big, but ultimately it's an encrypted anonymous way, and you actually access it through a particular browser, and that is encrypted and very anonymous. And ultimately this is just a page off of that site, and we see that you know, the things that are available. We've got credit cards for sale. We've got the little hacker's black book. I actually downloaded that book. I didn't buy it. I found it out there, and it's really, I mean, you could turn a ambitious 14-year-old with that book, and they would be able to do some things because of the free tools and the cheap tools that are out there, and the knowledge is out there that they could actually they could become effective at being a bad guy pretty easily if they had the want to. This is a particular browser. It's called the Onion Project, and this is a Tor browser, and that this is how you access the web. Kind of, to me, it's like the way the web used to be a long time ago. It's, the sites aren't really pretty or anything. It's just a very anonymous way to access the web. And ultimately, what they're doing is they're making money out there. You can get a brand new credit card that's fresh. You can get $1,000, $2,000 for it. For banking credentials that are fresh, you can get a couple $1,000s for. There were 60 million people. This is 2018. That's old. It's so much higher than that right now, that were victims of identity theft. Your Social Security number, they're cheap. Driver's license, $20. A good passport could be worth $1,000, $2,000. And ultimately, they're taking this and kind of going back to the beginning with the password thing. There's so many places that you have a username and a password, and that's the only security that's there. And if you're using the same username, which a lot of times is your email address, and you're using that same password, and one of those sites gets breached, you're now exposed to a lot of other things that, from a social standpoint, these bad actors can figure out about you. So it's real important to manage passwords. Human errors. I mean, Chris, what are you seeing out there as far as, where these breaches are coming from?
Well, just as it says, humans, the employees of companies, something looks legit, they click on it, they're interested, they don't understand the risk, accidental deletions, human error is just really what it boils down to, and that's the #1 cause of data loss and breaches.
Yep, that's right. And I always say, they still do hack systems, but they're hacking people more, and quite frankly, because it's easier. People are, think about it. We're all running wide open, and a lot of times we're not paying attention. And I think this next slide here talks about, you remember how I mentioned Atlanta, and they lived on their systems for 300 days. This is just kind of that is called a persistent threat. And it's basically, this is a timeline here. The first phase is where they're planning. They're using all of their wares and know-how, and studying, doing social media, anything they can find out about a particular victim, a particular vertical, a particular software that might have an exploit that they could go into a vertical market. If you were a business owner and you were wanting to be a vertical, you're going to pick a vertical market to go into, and take off, and they could exploit that particular piece of software. And then ultimately somebody sends an email. This is just one way. Somebody clicks a link on a website, and it drops a payload onto a system, a single system, or maybe they hacked it through a web portal that's a business web portal, and they were able to drop some file on there. That the files are very much designed to not be detected by desktop security. Then it lives on there, and then they begin to do discoveries of, where am I, basically. They may know, they may not know, but they enumerate the network. They basically, they get out and they scout, and they look around, and they figure out what's going on, what what machines am I on, what data do I have, so on and so on. And ultimately, they're gonna just steal that data, and because it's very valuable, and they may encrypt it after they steal it. They do whatever, and ultimately somebody finds out. And as the Verizon report showed, they usually live on there about 100 days before it's discovered, and then you have to contain it. You have to figure out what happened, and those things are very, very, very difficult to determine whether you've had a security incident or a security breach. Those terms from a legal perspective are very important, because ransomware in itself is where they encrypted your files, and that's a security incident. They haven't stolen data, no personal identifiable or information or EPHI. None of the the fancy terms for people's personal data has been stolen. It's just not in your, I always say you're out of work. You're not out of business per se, as long as you got a great backup. But if they have stolen the data, that opens up Pandora's box to the legal implications of what what you may expose your company to. Anything you want to add to that as far as
Yeah,
what you're
the
seeing?
timeline for the 100 days is, that's certainly an extended timeline, but it's all very accurate. Some of the smaller companies, it'll be a bit less, because they want to get in, they want to determine the best course of action to remove backups or remove recovery options, and then they encrypt quite quickly, usually 7 to 10 days or so, because they don't want to get detected. But those are very small clients and locations, but still very impactful. And you do that a million times, and you're making quite a bit of Bitcoin money by getting your data recovered. But yeah, that's exactly the process, and it's what we hear and see in the industry as well.
Yeah. And ultimately, what we're trying to do as a company is we're trying to really handle this on both ends of this. The sooner you know that the compromise happens and you go and you get to the containment phase, you want to bring that containment phase up immediately after the compromise. And then on the other side of things, you want to be able to, if it all really turns bad on you, you want to be able to recover in minutes or hours rather than days or weeks to do the recovery. Those are the two areas that really that are areas for, we'll say, improvement, or are really trying to to narrow down. We'll talk a little bit about some things that we see that are errors that are happening often in this small to mid-sized business space. This one here, I tell you, I was actually on a call. I did a network evaluation this morning remotely, and pretty big client. I don't know, they got maybe probably about 50, not that big, about 50 users. Now they're all over the place, and one of the things I'm pushing them heavy. I'm like, listen, we want to block personal emails at work. There's not a reason, in most cases, that people need it, but that's a huge risk, because email being one of your major areas. And the cool thing is that most people's firewalls have the ability to block that with a check. I mean, so it's really easy to block, and yet business owners don't do it. Another one we talked about, password management, and that being another major component of the world. We're using the same password too often. We recommend a product called LastPass, or some product that can remember and even generate complex passwords. Really a great product. Physical access is the best access from a security perspective, and we can't forget, where are our filing cabinets? What are we leaving around the office just laying there that someone could pick up? I did an evaluation for a facility that had 7 locations, and they had members, And part of the form that they had the members fill out had their social and their address, phone number, all that kind of stuff on it. And literally in 2 of the locations, there was a file that was behind the computer where all the people were that had a stack of these sensitive, these basically applications for membership just sitting there where, if I would have wanted to, I could have just simply picked them up and walked off with them. So we want to think about not just the cyber side of things, but also the physical side of things. Another one is malicious links and bad attachments. There's filters that can really go a long way. And we're going to talk in a minute about a defense in depth strategy. I'd said earlier with the fact that more than 75% of machines had desktop security that got ransomware in Q4 of last year. Just having that single layer of protection is not going to be enough. Another one is properly disposing of hard drives is another big area for risk. Used to be in the medical space, it was one of the higher. It's gone down because that space has been focusing heavily on encryption and proper data destruction. But still, this is a major threat out there where you can't donate machines and all the things that we used to do because the data is too valuable. You have to remove and destroy the hard drives. Kind of going back to websites, not having filters in place, allowing your people to go to sites that are malicious, and then losing company devices, or even in today's world with the bring your own device, we give our employees a large amount of data in just their email, being able to check it on their phone. So that's something that you need to be running some form of encryption software, mobile device management on these endpoints so that that data is protected. Also, putting an infected USB in a PC. Is a major way. Josh, are you familiar with the Stuxnets? Did you ever read about that?
No, I haven't heard about that one.
It's kind of old, but to me, I think it's very interesting. This is something that the Israelis did to Iran. They dropped a USB stick in the parking lot, and they knew what type of controllers. They had Siemens control equipment that was basically spinning their centrifuges, making uranium, or processing it, for bomb making grade uranium. And they dropped a USB key in the parking lot, and someone put it in their machine, and it allowed them to change the readings off of the controller, and it put them back 1.5 years. This is just happened some years ago, maybe in 2016. But think about it, guys, from a standpoint, if somebody dropped a USB in your parking lot that said financial data on it, would someone in your organization pick that up and put it into a computer? I would bet that there's a high probability that would happen. And they can put files on there that auto run. If the network's not configured right, it can drop that persistent threat on a machine, and then they can live on your network for 100 days and ultimately put you in a bad spot. All right, so we want to jump into how we've kind of really went over, what's going on and areas that we need to focus on. Now, ultimately, how do we protect ourselves from the bad actors? What do we need to be doing? And as a company, we have always tried to provide more services than the traditional IT company. And if you look at this is something we came up with as kind of our secret sauce, if you will, that I'll openly share with anybody, but it's prepare, prevent, and prevail. And most IT providers are focused a lot on the prevention side of things. and it's a good place to be focused. It's definitely an area that is essential. But in what I have seen over my 20 years in this industry, the prepare side and the prevail side are things that we definitely want to have on our radar. And I tell you, in our market, we are definitely underserved because I'm with clients, other than this particular period where I'm about to go stir crazy. I may see up to 7, 9 clients every week. I mean, like a sewing machine. So I'm walking in offices, I see the real deal of what's going on, and they're not prepared. And some key elements of preparedness are, going to be this dark web scan. You need to know whenever you have data that gets leaked out on the dark web. So you can ultimately go out and you change all your passwords. You need to be educating your employees with some form of ongoing cybersecurity education. There is a subset of documents that are very important to have from a governance standpoint. Again, at the end of the day, you want to be able to show that you have done your due diligence and that you practice due care. Those are kind of legal terms, but these documents, and along with that training and the simulated phishing email and doing some form of employee vulnerability where you're classing your employees so that you know where your greatest risk is. This is where you want to be able to stand if something were to happen. You want to be able to ultimately say that you weren't, and I struggled with this word earlier. I want it to be able to say that you are, you're not irresponsible, nor, or worse, you're not negligent. You want to be able to, again, be able to, in a court of law or whatever, however it comes out, that you've done the good and right thing. And ultimately, this preparation phase is where we want to start with. I know that Axcient is big on security. It's one of the reasons why I really, I like partnering with you guys. Speak to that a little bit for me, Josh.
Security is really, really important to Axcient, and from a data protection business continuity vendor angle, we actually have the highest security rating of any one in the space. We use a third-party company that does vetting for us, and they have gone through and done a vet of our systems, and they check DNS health, patching, upgrades, that sort of thing. And we have a 96 out of 100, an A rating in the space for security. So it's very important. All of our employees go through training. We're all certified, and yeah, we're very proud of our security rating.
Yeah, I know. I've known that. I mean, you guys had before I got my CISSP, y'all had one on board, and I had some great conversations. I mean, this has been years and years ago. Where you guys were really a leading entity. And again, this particular clientele that I speak with, we're not ever going to get to show them how smart you are, and I'm sorry, because we'll lose them. But some of the things that Axcient does is patented. The technology is patented, and the air gapping, that the ability to separate live data from backup data and protect it is so huge. And again, just isn't, these folks wouldn't appreciate all of those techie details, but it's really a major component of what we believe in as a company, and a lot of that I've learned from your team. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The other thing is prevention. That's one of the areas that, again, we focus on a lot. And it's a larger conversation because each individual client has a different threat landscape based on how many locations. Do they allow bring your own device? Do they have people working from home? I'll kind of touch on that for just a second, the people working from home thing. It concerns me for a local market, because there's some easy ways to set it up that are so not secure. And you know, I would suspect, and I'm curious to see the data prove me right or wrong, and I'm okay with either way because I want to know. I will suspect that there will be a big uptick in cyber activity that we will see whenever these reports. I probably won't see them until Q3, but because of people not setting their space up securely, as well as there will probably be a lot of data loss because of improper data loss prevention or ways that they're sharing files. And I'll use one example where, like, a lot of people use Dropbox, and literally, and I think there's a slide in here, I'm gonna talk about that a little bit deeper, but literally, man, you could pop into your personal Dropbox, upload all the company files to it, and if somebody breaches your Dropbox account, now they've breached your company. And that's a bad spot to be. But we'll get there in a second. But kind of going through prevention just a little bit, and I'm going to spend a little time on the next slide to talk about some of the components that you need to have in place, of which you want to have a defense in depth strategy. You can't have one layer of security. You need to have some form of proactive plan that is monitoring your network. You need to do some business coaching. You need to understand the implications of how you're sharing files. How do you strategically, not only from a lot of times efficiency is the thing that drives the day in the way that networks are designed, when there has to be some considerations for security. If you look at security in its basic format, it is the CIA triad: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So you want to look at things from that perspective, and then you need to have somebody assigned to be the go-to engineer that's basically leading the camp there. This is kind of our secret sauce. It's in your book. I'll touch over it just quickly because it lends itself to a bigger conversation. But you need to be doing security awareness training with some dark web scanning so that you're on top of things in a proactive manner. With your email, you need to be running some form of filtering that is checking the links and the attachments before it comes to the inbox. You need to have webmail blocked for personal use, webmail for employees blocked. You want to use some form. You need to be doing a password management where you're using complex passwords where they're being changed, I would say about every 90 days, and possibly even using a tool so that you're not tempted to use the same password over and over, like a LastPass that securely stores your passwords. You need to be using two-factor authentication on any, what I call one-to-many, which is basically if you're running QuickBooks online, right? I got one portal and I have access to many records. Same way if you're connecting into your office remotely, you need to be using a two-factor or multi-factor authentication piece. Also, the firewall is very important in that most of the traffic today does not do screening or scanning of encrypted traffic. It is meaning, like the HTTPS, they call it DPISSL, but it's deep packet inspection over secure socket layer, which is basically when you look at the website and it says HTTPS, if you have a traditional firewall, it will not scan that traffic within that encryption. So that's a big vulnerability because most websites is probably 75–80% in today's world that are secure. You need to have some form of next generation endpoint security. And if we link back to the slide that talked about the 0-day threat, of the traditional endpoint security, you know, the Nortons of the world, they are basically getting a new update of list of problems, if you will, or that antivirus list that I showed you. It's getting a new update to that list about once a day, whereas this next generation endpoint security is actually looking at behaviors. So it's really targeted at you know, they're called MITRE, M-I-T-R-E, if you guys ever wanted to look that up, attacks that are that these bad actors are doing to beat the antivirus ultimately. But you need something that's not just working off of definitions, that's working off of behaviors. Then we use a product that Cisco owns that's a cloud-based DNS type firewall. I'm not going to go into that. And then patching. You want to have all of your systems patched, and you want to run a deep scan on it. We run a deep scan on a nightly basis on all of our machines. So that is something that will basically, if anything ever got through, we're going to know it. We're trying to not let them live on our systems 100 days. We want to be able to detect it early on so we can mitigate those risks that come with them getting on our network and figuring out what we got and stealing it from us. And you got to think about patching not only Microsoft products per se, but also Adobe and Chrome and GoToMeeting and all the softwares that you have on your systems. Then you need a great data backup and a business continuity plan. Josh, I know that's one of the big areas. Speak to that for me for just a second. What are some components? What are some things we need to know?
Well, obviously having the proper backup solution in place based on some sort of SLA that is needed. You know, I need to, if there was a localized disaster, meaning a server or workstation were to go down, how fast do I need to be up and running again? And do I have adequate backups and resources to be able to provide that? Is the first aspect of that. And then once that's been established and set up, creating and going through an actual disaster recovery plan. If there was a localized disaster, what is the process? If there was a site-wide disaster, what is the actual process? And doing these exercises actually will pay great dividends in the event of an actual disaster because everybody's on the same page and can be held accountable to those SLAs that have been set.
Yeah. Perfect. And just for our audience, some won't know what SLAs are. That's a service level agreement. And the way that I like to frame it and is basically using the tool that you guys provide that you mentioned earlier about what does an hour of downtime cost. You want to figure out how much that is, number one, because it'll be, for most companies, it's 4 times than if I just ask them, it's usually 4 times more. And this isn't fuzzy math, this is real deal stuff, but you want to run that and you want to be able to say, okay, I can be without my system for this number of hours. And then you want to have, that's a SLA, you want to determine what is my service level agreement, what is it when it's, I can't go any further than that. You need to do that math, and I'll help with that. And then finally, SIM and SOC, which is Security Information Event Management and the Security Operations Center. And really what that is, of course, that'll meet all of the compliance requirements that are needed, but it's also like Big Brother. And I am very, it's this watching over the network. It's watching all of the logs on the computers, and it sends all the logs to a huge data center, and they use artificial intelligence in order to see where anomalies show up. And when an anomaly shows up, it puts that into a human, you know, points a human on top of that to jump on top of it. And I tell you guys, what I'm doing right now as a business owner is, you know, I'm not out seeing people, so I have some time on my hands. I am working very diligently between those 2 points of that next generation endpoint security. The product that we use interfaces with that SIM and SOC. And we have developed a security operation team here where we're now monitoring networks 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. and to do proactive stopping of when we see something bad happen. It's a whole nother conversation that, man, I can't wait to talk to people about, but it really, it has taken us to really a new level, and I'm very proud of my team and what we're doing. But you, in today's environment, man, you got people on laptops all over the place. You got people working from home. You really need to know what's going on their systems, and there is absolutely no way to know unless you have a product like this running on the network. And again, I don't want to be a sales pitch here, but I'm really passionate about that. It's something that is just, it's really a quantum leap for our company. Another thing is there's that 11-step protection. You can kind of evaluate yourself with that. That's kind of what that next document is to kind of evaluate yourself and check your, do a self-assessment on some of those components. All right, Prevail. This is really where we want to be, man. We want to be when it all really goes bad. And there's a chance, even doing all the right things. If you're not doing all the right things, it's they say from the data I get, Josh, you may have some data, it's about a 1 in 5. If you're in business 5 years, there's the chance of you having a security incident's pretty doggone high. About a 20% chance per year. And so we really want to think about not, kind of this, what I want to talk about is not a matter of if, but when. And here's the components that you want to have in that Prevail plan. You want to have a disaster recovery and business continuity plan in place that determines how long I can be without my systems and have a backup that matches that. Axcient is the king in that area. And guys, this is really affordable stuff, which makes it even really cool. And then you want to have an incident response team. You want to have a group of people within your organization where you've already gone through what's going to happen if this happens, what happens, and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes I think people make it so complicated that they never do it, when really, man, you could sit down I could sit down with a group of people, the leadership team in an organization, and in an hour have a basic plan hammered out that you're going to be so far ahead by having that, because you're going to know what to do, because you've already lived through some possible threats. Then you want to have a great cyber liability insurance policy. And I vet these all the time, and I'll tell you, they are oftentimes very lacking. And at the end of the day, a good policy is going to have people that you can work with, and that are going to really take control of the situation. And they've got Bitcoins already in the bank, where if you try to move Bitcoins out of your primary account to a Bitcoin account, there's a hold because of the AML laws, the anti-money laundering laws that are in place in America. You can't move money around quick enough in order to be in a position to prevail. And then you need to have a statement, you need to have some coaching that if and when this happens, you're not in a position where you say no comment. You want to be able to say, hey guys, I want you to know that we've done our due diligence. We are very much into informing and educating, and we understand the risk, and we've taken measures to prevent the risk. This is a horrible thing that's happened to us, and I assure you that I have a full incident response team working diligently to determine what's happened and the impact, and we know when we're going to determine the path forward once we've kind of figured it all out, and we'll be issuing more statements as time moves along. You want to be able to say that and really be able to do that, have done that, and to be able to say that with confidence and have that kind of stuff on the tip of your tongue. I don't know, Josh, if you want to weigh into any of that.
Yeah, the PR stuff would be a little bit out of my realm there, but the disaster recovery and business continuity and the incident response is certainly something that BIS can accommodate through our Axcient solution, and they're time tested and true. And it's super important to lay it all out, have all the information on the table, so that when and if there is a disaster, everything is taken care of, everything's covered. There's no gaps in anything, and so it's really important to be able to do that. And with some of our solutions, we have preventative measures and automated testing. So there's not this daily act of somebody from a tech team having to go in and test backup. So our solutions do that for you. They virtualize the machines to make sure they're actually bootable. We have a lot of preventive measures in place to make sure that the data integrity is actually good, and that you're not getting false positives and such. So we certainly have that all covered.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if you're aware, but you know the term auto verify.
Yeah,
Did you know who came up with that?
I believe that was you, sir.
It was. I'm just bragging to my people here is all. But yeah, I mean, I've been working with these guys a long time, and that auto verify component, again, it's their component. I just came up with the name of it, is absolutely awesome, because backups aren't about backup. Backups are about restoration, and knowing that you have restoration is huge, and that really, from a standpoint of ensuring that, was a quantum leap that you guys did. And then the other thing is you know, looking at really data as a whole and understanding the risk, you know, understand where your data is and being able to you know, basically account for it. You guys have a full suite of products that pull that off. And the cool thing is because I have such a great relationship with these guys, I can have Josh help me devise solutions for people, which is a, you know, really an advantage for me as a you know, managed security provider. All right, so I want to move. There's some things here that we want to give you guys to help in way of being prepared. Again, you don't necessarily need me. I am happy to help you guys for sure, but if you need to go down these lists and you need to be able to do these things, and here's just some guides that we've put together over the years that can help you you know, get yourself into a position to prevail whenever it happens. Those are all found, of course, in your workbook. And you know, ultimately, you want to have, when it's all said and done, you want to have a very reliable backup, or possibly even better, a business continuity plan. And I want to kind of, just from a practicality standpoint, distinguish between these two for a small to mid-sized client. When we look at a reliable backup, oftentimes we think about, you know, a cloud-based backup solution where we're going to take a set, say, let's just use QuickBooks. Very simple. We take our QuickBooks database and we back up the database every night in the cloud. Well, that's great because we have the backup. But in order to run that system, especially if you had 20 users and the QuickBooks lives on the server and something happens to your server, well, in order to restore that file, I can have the file all day long, but if I don't have the system in place to run that file, it's really irrelevant. I'm going to have to go out and get a new server. I'm going to have to restore, you know, load the operating system, restore the user profiles, set up the printer, set up the data structure, and then restore the data. And that's going to take time. So that's kind of gets down to those calculators that we talked about earlier. Whereas if you look at a better solution, what we call a business continuity solution, that is where the entire server is backed up. We'll use the case that happened to the city of Atlanta. They can't uncheck a box and not back up the QuickBooks data file, because the entire volume, the entire server, every part of the server is being backed up, and there's an extra appliance, a piece of hardware on premise that you can literally start that environment up and you know, quickly, within 15, 20 minutes, you can have that server running, even if the main server were to be encrypted or to be broken or whatever else. So we really move from the disaster recovery into a business continuity where we're able to continue business. And I think that is an essential understanding, because I talk to people all the time. They're like, oh yeah, I got my stuff backed up in the cloud. And they think, well, cool, it's in the cloud, I'm going to be able to magically run it when something breaks. And that's really not the case. I see that often. All right, Josh, this is your wheelhouse. Talk to me.
Business continuity is just everything, and it is what that is, right? It's staying in production when there's been some sort of disaster, and having the right tools in place can make that really seamless and a really good experience. Every company has some sort of profit that they're making in one way or the other, and by maintaining that ability to continue to make money keeps you in business is just what that is. So yeah, ensuring that you have the right solution in place is really key here to maintain the continuity of your business.
Yeah, I put a generator in on my last two houses. I just got through building a house, and there's nothing cooler than the power being out for hours and you never even knowing it. Because I mean, I don't care when it is. If you live in South Alabama and you're on the Gulf Coast in August, if your power goes out, you're going to know it in a short amount of time, because it's going to get hot. And ultimately, business owners that have that level of security of business continuity, it's a game changer in the event that when and if, I usually say when, something bad happens. So it's real important. Another part that I think is really important is this air gapping. Talk to me about Axcient's air gapping, because this is another kind of game changer that other solutions do not provide this.
Yeah, this is an industry differentiator for us. And if we go back to, you don't have to go back to it, but if we reference back to one of your first 10 or so slides, there was the discussion about what happens when a bad actor gains access to the network, and they do a little investigating and they determine what the production systems are and where the backups are. And so what we've created is the ability to segregate the backups from the offsite location, to where if the bad actor gains access to the cloud or offsite location of data and they actually go through and visibly delete the data, we actually have a redundant copy of that that's completely siloed outside of that offsite, so that data is not actually ever purged. And we have the keys locked down to about 2 people in our entire company, and they'll be, short of a blood test to make sure you are who you are when you need to recover that. But your data is protected. If you get it off site and you get it into our cloud, no matter what happens, your data will be recoverable. And our solution that has this in it, there's a local device that has a bit of air gapping baked into it, in the sense that even locally, if a bad actor tries to delete data, visibly it's gone, but we actually don't ever purge it from the storage system, so that it can be recovered and business continuity can be put into effect. So it is a differentiator for us in the space, and it's included with the software, and it's actually been used before we actually advertised it. We had it in place, and a company was infiltrated through a password management solution, and they would have literally gone out of business if we had not had this in place. And they were able to recover the data they needed to keep the end user in place and to keep themselves out of litigation. So it's time tested already, which is fantastic.
Yeah, really a game changer. And as I mentioned it earlier, these bad actors, they are targeting systems as well as, they're targeting everything, but they're very, I mean, they'll find a vulnerability in a particular product and they will launch and exploit. So you want to have ultimately, you know, say you're using a particular type of backup software, they will target that and they will figure out a hole in it, and then they could hurt you. So you want to have this is basically a physical air gap. So there's not a software way that has the vulnerability the way this is designed. It's very impressive, and it's a whole different conversation, but if you know, it's something we can talk about offline more, but something really from a security perspective, it's head and shoulders above what else is out there. All right, so we'll hit up just a little bit. You know, of course, it's such a big topic. I'm sure all of you guys are dying to talk about the coronavirus. I'm not, because I've heard so much about it. But here's some things that I think are very practical from a security perspective in the events that have taken place and that we're all working from home, right? A lot of remote workers going on, and I want to talk a little bit about Dropbox in particular, but it could be any product that's like this, a file sync product. You need to not use these things. It's just tons of risk. Data loss can happen because what you're doing basically is you're allowing your users to go into your filing cabinets, make copies of your files, and store them at their house. And there is no way that you know how secure their house is or not. We could expand this even greater than off of just this one product, but I thought this product would be a good way to illustrate what's happening and what can happen out in the world now. You can get, you know, data corrupted. You can have lawsuits based on what's happened. There can be tons of compliance violations that are happening by allowing people to take files from their from your office into their environment. Just a total loss of accountability. You don't know, because once that file's out of your office, it's in the wild, and you could pretty much mark it down that it's out. So that's an important component. And then, you know, just not being able to have access to the files in general. So something that Axcient provides is a HIPAA secure way to manage these types of files. It's another product. I don't want to go into it again. I'm not trying to sell you, but this is stuff that I really think that you need to think about whenever you're allowing your people to work from home. Is what do they have access to? What are they putting these files on, and so on and so on and so on. All right, so let's talk about what should you do next. I'll tell you one thing that I think is really important is you don't want to bury your hand. Actually, that should be head in the sand when it comes to your security. They're coming to get you. Matter of fact, just a report just on my email alone, the average email account in America is being attempted to be hacked. I think it's 13 times per hour. So, I mean, these things, we're getting pushed and shoved around all the time, all day long. And ultimately, you know, we don't want to bury our head in the sand about this and think that it can't happen to you, because when it does happen, it's going to hurt way worse. You can experience a little pain in doing the work on the front end, and then enjoy the pleasures of your labors on the back end, or you can ignore the things now, and you know, again, the risk is getting greater, the chances of something bad happening, and you're going to be, you know, in a painful state at a later date. One of the offers that we got, that we're doing for all the people that have joined us on this webinar, is we're giving you guys a free, we're calling it a hurricane, we're kind of getting into hurricane season, business inspection. And with that, we're going to do a network evaluation. We're going to review your backups. We're going to review your plans and policies, as well as give you free employee cybersecurity training. And this is a great, you know, it's not a full, you know, NIST cyber, you know, security review, or, you know, security risk assessment. But the cool thing about it is that I am kind of an odd animal like Josh, in that I get technology and I get security, but I also get business. So I believe what I do during this, I actually do this myself for clients, is it'll give you a lot of great information to help you enumerate your risk, and then be able to put some things to lower that risk are free, are very inexpensive, and they just really need to have some leadership to make it happen. And we'll offer that service for free. Normally that's a $1,300 deal, and that is for anybody who has been on this been on this webinar. All we ask to receive that is, if you would, there's a checkbox somewhere on that form that's on your
Hey, Philip, I'm about to send it to him actually in the chat box. Since we ended up doing this virtually, if you would just fill out this survey for us, I'm about to send over the link. Like I said, it's going to help us see what we can do better and also see what kind of topics you're interested in learning more about. Sorry.
No, perfect. That's we had this was all scheduled to be a on-premise. We were going to be eating Morton steaks right now, but instead we had pizzas delivered for everybody. So sorry for the we can thank the COVID-19 for the situation, I guess. Let's jump in. Let's ask. Give opportunity to ask you. Have everyone ask questions.
Okay, let's see here. They may be filling out that gift card. That survey, but let's see what we had come in. Is there a specific tool you should use when telecommuting?
That's pretty broad. I'll tell you the basic premise of telecommuting. You got to think about the device that you're on. A lot of people, they'll say, I got a VPN back to the office, so I'm safe. Well, if you had a keylogger, let's say something that was logging the keys on your computer at home, the bad actors could be basically getting a ton of information about how to access the mothership, what you're connecting to back at the office. So you need a minimum of some good security and making sure that the device that you're having at home has good security on it, that it's patched, that it's being monitored, and things like that, because you are basically extending your network. Even if you do it securely, you're extending your network back to the home user. And if they're using their own devices, kids been playing games on, there's just no telling what is on that particular machine. So that's one particular component. Another that I would say would be very important to use if you're working remotely is some form of multi-factor authentication, something that where it's you got to touch a button on the phone or something in order to put in a code that gets texted to you. Those are some very, very important pieces, because you don't want to have access to your entire network be dependent on a username and a password. Josh, you want to add to that?
No, you're right. A secure way to access your data while you're remote is the best, and the multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication is a sure way to ensure that you are the only person logging into your important information and details.
Yep. And then of course, what files are leaving your office? Where are they resting? Can you recall them? Can you get them back? Those are components that really need to be considered. You wouldn't want to have all your company database out there on the computer and not be able to call it back, or something like that. Those are things that I would be very concerned about.
Okay, we had another one come in. Instead of Dropbox, what should I use?
Axcient makes a product that we call Cloud Sync, And same components as Dropbox as far as the basic principles how it works. But the cool thing is that it logs all of the behaviors of a user. You can see when a person logs in, which files they touch. You can also set permissions so that they're able to view the file or whatever, but they're not able to download it. So it's controls in place that are allowing to log the activity as well as set permission-based levels, even whenever you're outside of the, when you're on a server, you would do that using the server. This gives you those same types of capabilities, but doing it remotely.
Okay.
Josh, did I miss any feature on that you think would be really relative?
No. The biggest differentiator there is that Dropbox is what we call a consumer grade solution. So it's been designed to be really simple, but there's a great lax in security. And by using the tool that you have through us, you're able to provide a tremendous amount of security while giving a user-friendly view of the data.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question, what can you do with your phones during a disaster?
Mobile device management, something that could, ultimately wipe the phone if it was lost, or even just on the general, this kind of brings the whole thing, to a head, I guess, this particular, predicament we're in. But you can put mobile device management in there where you can, lock the phone, you can, change the password, you can geolocate the phone if it's lost, you could ultimately wipe the phone in the event that something happens, as well as the phone is encrypted. And the good thing about encryption today, ransomware is ultimately encryption, and we've talked about all the bad ways that encryption's used. But the good thing about it is that even for health and human services, like HIPAA guidelines, if a phone is encrypted or a tablet or a laptop or whatever is encrypted, it's non-reportable. You could literally lose that device and you don't even have to report it. That's how good encryption is when used, properly. So encryption is probably one of the biggest components from a security perspective.
Okay, I believe that's all the questions we've had come in. So if you could, y'all, we've only received one survey so far. Going to be giving away that $50 gift card. So if you could fill out that, it would really help us out. But
yeah, and also if you take us up on the on that review, I can actually do that remotely. I should have mentioned that. I'm doing them. I'll need you to be on your server, on your main server with administrator password, but I can do all of those, all that work remotely. So we're totally, we're following all the guidelines for sure. All right. Well, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for sure. We appreciate the opportunity. And again, we're going to keep pedaling. We're going to keep working hard. We're going to get through this. We're going to be better on the other side. I hope this has been good for you, Josh. I appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to join us.
Not a problem.
Yeah, thank you for all the support you've given us over the years. And we'll be in touch, guys. And if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out. You guys have got my email, and if we need to bring in a big gun, I can put Josh in on your situation. So thanks again, and y'all have a great day and stay safe out there.
Hey, thanks a lot.